Okay, so you've heard of Back to Eden gardening with wood chips, and you've watched some of the videos about it and say, oh my gosh, this must be too good to be true. Well, it is and it isn't. So Back to Eden gardening is incredibly efficient once it's established, but the first 2 to 3 years can be very difficult to get an established garden. Today, what I want to do is call out the glaring flaws within the Back to Eden or wood chip garden, which, by the way, I'm still a fan of, as you can see by the 5,000 square feet of wood chips that I have in my front yard. But there are flaws, and I think people should know what they are, because once you know them, you can overcome them, and you can get to this beautiful Back to Eden dream. Because this system can work in almost any area, any microbiome. You just have to know what the problems are so you can compensate for them. So here's the big misconception with the Back to Eden documentary and gardening lifestyle. It makes it look like all you need is wood chips and you're going to see compounding results over time, when that's not true. I think very highly of Paul Gauci, the guy behind the Back to Eden movement, and I just think it's worth calling out the fact that you need a lot of nitrogen to make this work for you. Here's why you need it. Okay, so good soil, which, yes, wood chips are all about making good soil. Good soil is all about the balance between nitrogen and carbon. So what I have here are my 4 composting boxes. I still need to empty them because I have the final 2 over here that are actually pretty much ready to go. Right now they're kind of our trash boxes, which is a little bit embarrassing for this video. But you can see right here that on the top we have this nice layer of grass, but as I've dug deeper down here, you can see it gets a lot more wet and moist, looking like traditional black gold. You can see at the bottom of these boxes, which I just emptied, which I never put any dirt or soil in these, just leaves, a lot of spent food, maybe some shredded paper, stuff like that, and you can see pretty good soil outcome. The problem with this whole Back to Eden gardening thing is that the belief that you don't have to, well, there's a good shot. You can kind of see the side of that one coming out, some good soil deeper in there. The misconception being that all you need is wood chips, when in reality you need this healthy balance of nitrogen to balance the high carbon density of the wood chips. So doing this at a small scale in these compost boxes can take a few months if you really are diligent about covering them, layering them in the proper carbon nitrogen ratios, getting them very good and moist, measuring them, turning them. There's a lot of things to do with compost to get it good, and that can take a season to have a good compost crop from these. But I've got a garden that's so big. How do I make that work on a large scale? How do you make it work on a large scale? Okay, as I'm walking back to my my garden, let me talk about the misconception, and that is that not all wood chips are created equal. And I'm not even talking about a pine tree versus a cedar tree, although there are some differences there. I'm just talking about on any given tree, the difference between trunks, limbs, and bark and leaves especially. There are vast differences in the nutritional breakdown of those. And when I say nutrition, I'm talking about the nutrition for your soil. So if you're like me and you're all about free stuff, maybe you've looked into services like Chip Drop. Okay, Chip Drop will give you free wood chips. Sometimes you can choose to leave a tip, but Chip Drop will give you free wood chips, which is what all of this is. The good side to that is that it's free. The bad side to that is that it's largely trunks and large limbs. Now, why does that matter? Well, that's about the most carbon dense material you can get. So you really need to add a nitrogen boost to really get the most out of this. Now, let's say you're like me and you love a deal and you jumped the gun and you bought 100 cubic yards, or ordered 100 cubic yards of very carbon dense wood chips. What do? How do you correct that mistake? No problem. Seriously, don't sweat about it. A lot of YouTubers out there will talk to you about how difficult it's going to be and how prone it is to failure. At the end of the day, just realize your first and second year are not going to be your best years, no matter what you do. But there's a lot of stuff that you can do to make it better. So in this video, I've got 7 ways, all of which I either have done or will be doing for this front yard composting, nitrogen addition to my wood chips. So kind of like composting. 7 ways to basically make sure this garden is ready in the spring when we're ready to start putting seeds in the ground. Okay, so number 1 is going to be the most obvious thing, and that is to put some actual compost down. So if you have compost, if you've got a compost pile or compost boxes like I do, which are right over, right there, if you have any of that stuff, lay it down. That's something that I'll be doing probably later today, actually. Or, no shame in buying good compost, especially in bulk. Sometimes your city has, a truckload of compost for $100 type of situation. So that's totally worth it too. The second way that I recommend getting a lot of nitrogen on your wood chip pile is to have a situation like this. So this is our chicken run that I really kind of think of it more as a compost run. Today we actually have the door open, so the chickens are kind of just scattered throughout the pasture right now. Which, please don't judge my pasture. It is so gross. This is like the worst time of the year. All the spent hay on the ground that the sheep don't finish. It's a mess. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about nitrogen. So, small animals. We have this compost run with the chickens that, basically this is where they spend 90% of their days. So a lot of scraps are thrown out to them that they eat, and what they don't eat gets turned in to the compost. Very nitrogen rich. Let me introduce you to another small animal. Okay, so there's chickens, but let me show you another small animal that is even more nitrogen dense. We've got these rabbits, and rabbits are incredible. This is our feed out box. So these, actually the one who's moving around we're keeping, but everyone else is destined for meat and pelts. But I wanted to show you this. Take the latch off, or the carabiner off, open the latch, and show you this. They need to be moved right now. So this is kind of like their winter setup, and in a different setup they'd be right on the grass, but like, look at that. That poop is not far from this one's nibbling on the cord. That poop is not far from the cage. There's a little bit more room down there, but oh, beautiful. It's beautiful. So this is sitting on an 8-inch platform. These are 2x8s that it sits on. During the winter months, we're getting just about to the stage where we can put them on grass, because we don't have snow on the ground anymore. But, that's 8 inches tall of bunny manure. So if you don't keep rabbits, even if you keep them as just pets, they are a gardener's best friend, because their nitrogen-rich poop is a cold manure. It can be applied directly to your garden. Does not need composting. So I just mentioned small animal manure. You can probably guess what number 3 is going to be. It is large animal manure. So I don't own horses, but my neighbor has a horse and a mule. And you can see all that awesome poop that they've laid there. Horse manure and cow manure is very hot. It's a very hot manure, so it will require composting. However, if your timing is different than mine, you can take this stuff. In Utah we have KSL, but there's Craigslist and stuff where you can request this from farmers, and sometimes if you're willing to pick it up, they'll give it to you for free. Another good situation is I have sheep, and so there are situations where I do put my sheep on my wood chips, and if my wood chips were in a different situation, aka not my front lawn, I would probably put my sheep there and overwinter them. The reason being is, look at this. Not as big as horse poop, but tons of poop. That if you can put sheep on top of that and then chickens over it after that, then you're going to be able to, till that nitrogen back into your ground. Okay, number 4. This one is especially beneficial if you do not have a compost run. which again, here's another selling point for the compost run. Look what they're doing. I just tilled that a little bit, or tossed it, I guess you should say. And they're doing exactly what you want them to do. They're looking for food deep down in there. Endless goodies for a chicken in there. But number 4 that I want to talk about is food scraps. So our food scraps go directly to our compost run. You can see we have on the menu today, we have some spaghetti squash. I think that purple one is just like a weird shaped little pumpkin, and then some spent little apples that were going bad at our neighbor's house. Weren't great for humans, but good for chickens. You can see they're enjoying that. Same with eggshells. You can take those materials, maybe grind them up finer than what I've got here. If you've got a blender, like, it sounds tacky, but throw this stuff in a blender and just bam, apply it right into your garden. I'll do a walk and talk for this one. Reason number 5, and something that I have not done yet, but I've wanted to do this next year. That is vermicomposting, which is worms. Fancy name for worms, because if you say you're a worm farmer, people look at you weird. But if you say I'm a vermicomposter, that's cool. So worms, what I recommend is do it right. I think a lot of people think that, oh, well, worms' natural habitat is the ground. Just throw them on the ground. What I would recommend is to actually, if you're gonna vermicompost right into your wood chip garden, which is possible, get a lot of worms, by probably close to 1,000 worms. And what I would do is I would create at least one, more is better, breeding ground for the worms. Now what's a breeding ground? Basically what you do is you would get a tote and turn it upside down on your wood chip pile, and that's where the worms get dumped out. Okay, that's their home base. And fill that. Make sure every day you're throwing stuff in there like eggshells, fruit, basically things that worms would be really happy to eat. What that does is it creates a really safe environment. It creates a breeding ground. Like if you've watched literally any animal show on Animal Planet, you know that animals have, safe places that they will go to for their breeding operations, right? So create that. Fill it with great worm food, buy your worms, flip the tote upside down so it's a nice little greenhoused box, and your worms will thank you, and you'll have more worms. Okay, number 6, this one just about anyone can do. Do you have this stuff? It's called grass. I have this area of grass because you can't see because it's not a sunny day, but I've got this tree line here. You are looking south, so the sun comes up behind me and casts down here. This is about where is shadowed. There's a lot of shadow from the trees there. So if you do have grass, what you can do with that, take the grass clippings and either put it on top or till it, or turn it into the soil. Definitely save those grass clippings. I throw up a little bit every time I see people throw away grass clippings. Stop it. There's 1.5 million things you can do with grass clippings, okay? One of them is using it for your chop and drop back to Eden situation. Okay, and finally, number 7, garden clippings. So I talked about grass clippings. Why are garden clippings different? Well, garden clippings usually are not as easy as grass clippings because you have to more or less chop them up a little bit, which is fine. You can do that in any number of ways. I am super tacky, so I just use a machete and do it like that, but there's a lot of other chopping tools that you can use for that. Here's what I recommend though. Here's like the bonus tip, or the tip 7 2.0, which I guess is 72. So tip number 72 is to grow fodder for your garden. That's called cover crop. And so there's plenty of things that you can grow to basically till back into that. I'm a big fan of biomass for that. So there's a lot of things. I'm a huge fan of red clover for 1.5 million reasons, whether you till it in or not, just as a nitrogen fixer. So in a situation like this, what I'm thinking about doing is the rows that I'd be walking in, or maybe in between my rows, I would be planting red clover, because red clover can actually take the nitrogen from the atmosphere and inject it into the soil. So So you can use that for your garden, or you can grow other things that are just huge biomass producers. For example, comfrey, another nitrogen fixer, but also just a huge biomass producer. So you grow comfrey, chop it down, lay it on the ground, turn it into the wood chips, and to create a better compost soil. There's a lot of things that you can do. So clip your garden, throw it in here, and also grow fodder, grow cover crop too. Hey, thank you again for watching this video. I am PJ with the High Mountain Homestead. If you liked this video, consider subscribing to the channel. We are all about better soil, better plants, and better animals. And I feel like today we kind of tied them all in, and that's kind of the theme of this channel. So if any of that is up your alley, I'd love to see you on another video. Until then, this is the High Mountain Homestead. Happy homesteading.